The Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution started because the leader was Tsar Nicholas II. He was an autocratic leader, which means one man in charge, and Tsar is actually Russian for Caesar, taken after the Roman Empire. They believed in divine right and that he was anointed by God to rule Russia, basically absolutism. Russia was divided into two groups, the very poor and the very rich. Serfs and peasants were the poor, and the nobles were the rich. Russia was slow to industrialize, so serfs usually worked in the fields. And you can see there a portrait of Tsar Nicholas and a picture of the serf and peasant farmers. The people had been wanting to basically solve their problems since the early 1900s. The serfs and peasants were constantly hungry, did not have enough wood and supplies to heat their homes, and they were always suffering. So an event in the early 1900s called Bloody Sunday took place. Basically, Russia had just lost a war with Japan, which no one saw coming because Japan was supposed to be the weakling. Russia was the big, strong bear, and Japan was this little country that wasn't supposed to beat the bear, and they did. This angered a lot of people. And one Sunday after church, they marched to Tsar Nicholas' palace asking for reforms, begging for change. Now, they did not go there violently. Most of them had come just from church. Most of them were women and children. And they were marching to the palace because they truly believed that Tsar Nicholas didn't know they were suffering. They truly believed and had faith in him that he would make the changes once they spoke with him. Unfortunately, Tsar Nicholas was not there that day. He was actually at his summer home, and as the marchers got closer and closer to the palace, they were singing church songs. The palace guards thought they were chanting for revolution and shot them when they got there. Hence the term Bloody Sunday. Hundreds of innocent people were killed. During this time, World War I was on the horizon, and by the time we get into the 1910s, Russia is very knee-deep in World War I, and they are losing. Alright, they have been sent into World War I. Tsar Nicholas joined thinking he could beat everyone, and they did not have enough weapons, did not have enough food or medical supplies, and it was a bad situation, and they lost over 1 million soldiers. With the soldiers suffering in war, the people back home were also suffering because there was not enough food, not enough provisions for them either. Tsar Nicholas ignored these signs that the people weren't happy. Alright, because of this, he was seen as very weak and ineffective. He was not a bad leader. He was not a mean guy. He just was an idiot. He truly believed that his people loved him and that he could do no wrong. A group of people started to form called the Soviets or Socialist Council. They were workers, they were soldiers who were sick and tired of Tsar Nicholas, and they wanted change, and they wanted that change based on the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx's book. Now, when Tsar Nicholas visited the troops in World War I, he left his wife, the Tsarina Alexandria, in charge. She had taken in a man called Gregory Rasputin, who was supposed to be a holy monk, a holy man, and he was crazy. He was a common pedophile, he was a heroin addict, he was an alcoholic, he was crazy. He was completely crazy, and the people hated him because he was actually telling the Tsarina what to do. He was running the government, and the people did not trust him. And finally, in December 1916, a group of nobles assassinated him. They murdered him. In March 1917, there were riots in the streets by women, factory workers, and farmers. People had had enough. They had were trying to pull out of World War I. They were sick and tired of all of the suffering that was going on. And no matter what, the police couldn't keep up the order because there were just too many people rioting in the streets. They forced Tsar Nicholas to give up his throne. We call this abdicate, to give up. And Tsar Nicholas and his family were sent to Siberia and eventually they were going to be executed. And they killed the entire family, his children, even the family dog. It was a very horrible and bloody scene. After he was gone, they set up a Duma, or Russian Congress. They were supposed to do all the lawmaking. Unfortunately, the Duma did not work. The rich and the nobles still ran the Duma. And so, because Russia was so weak, it was time for another revolution, which included a guy named Lenin. Now, Vladimir Lenin basically starts to take over and gain strength in 1917. He had always been in Russia. He was a writer. He was a speaker. He actually left Russia for a little while because he basically was a enemy to the government, and he was able to get himself smuggled back into the country. And by 1917, he pushed for the Bolsheviks or communists to take control of Russia. His whole thing was peace, land, and bread. That was his saying. That was what the people wanted to hear. Peace, get us out of World War I. Land, take the land away from the rich and give us to us poor. And bread, meaning no more famine, no more food shortages. We're going to have enough food and bread for everybody. By 1922, Lenin reorganized the country and named it the Soviet Union. And when he did take over, he did bring peace. They immediately pulled out of World War I, and he did give them land and bread. So he did basically what he was supposed to do. The USSR, or Soviet Union, controlled a vast area as many countries began to fall to communism. And you can see there in the map. One of Lenin's plans was called the NEP, or the New Economic Policy. And it was a mix of communism and capitalism. You were allowed to have private businesses to grow and the economy to recover, but they had to be small private businesses. The government controlled the big businesses, oil, coal, the big industry, but they didn't take over small mom and pop stores, restaurants, and that kind of thing. Now, to remind you, communism is based on the book The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and it was written during the Industrial Revolution because Marx and Engels were horrified by the unfair treatment and unfair distribution of wealth. Okay, basically class warfare. The rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. In order to get rid of the capitalist system, the proletariat, or the workers, must overthrow the bourgeoisie, or the bosses or landowners. Communism is a theory that the government should own the farms and factories for the benefit of all citizens. Everyone should share the work equally, and everyone would receive an equal share of the rewards. So everybody's equal in every way, everyone's making the same amount of money, everybody's doing the same amount of work. Communism appealed to a huge number of poor people in Russia because they were suffering, and they figured if communism is going to lift us up, then let's go with communism. Lenin promised that communism would bring fairness and equality to all Russians.